to do a few things. I'm going to record, and I'm going to also have her able to share in case she wants to do that. She came to my other class today, and this was, I think, brilliant. There was very good things being discussed in the class. In fact, I've done this for a number of years, and every time I know that this gives a realistic boost to the students. For one reason, number one reason is really Lindsay excitement in sharing what she knows about the library resources, and also a very skilled way of thinking when it comes to marketing. She comes with good suggestions. I mean, in a way, I felt great, but I felt bad because she was giving so many solutions for the students already by just presenting in the previous class. But I think the students will appreciate that, and I was pretty clear to say that even though these were correct, they were not going to be the one getting you to a B plus and above. So the students have been warned, and I think here it's going to be the same. Here it's a little different because we have one client in the other class, so here we have sort of 4 different clients. So she's not going to be able, I'm guessing, to give that tremendous quality of opportunity and things for each one of those clients. But she's gonna probably look at the industries and give you directions. This is being recorded, so I will be able to post it. And at the same time, I believe that she will give us some kind of review that we'll be able to share with you, so you don't have to stress that everything you hear might be new and you wish you were able to record it or whatever. It's being recorded, and hopefully we have a document that makes it even easier. So thank you, Lindsay, for joining, and welcome.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I was trying to think of how to tackle this since there's 4 clients and 2 industries. So what I decided to do is sort of split it into 2. So I'm going to talk about the flower industry first and then the music industry second. And my hope is, even if, yeah, because I don't know how else to kind of make it fair to everyone. And I'm hoping that even, say you're in the music group, I hope that you will still kind of consider what the flower group is doing, because they are completely different industries, but the approach I've taken is the same. It kind of doesn't matter who the client is or what the industry is. I mean, I guess the only thing that's different is maybe some of the questions that I'm asking, but in terms of the resources, it's going to be a little bit similar. And I would just be so happy if after this class, or anytime you're working on marketing, you learned maybe not something that's so task oriented, but thinking about, if you had a different kind of project, how could you transfer those skills over? So, if I show you how to use OneSearch, or if I show you how to use a database, I don't want you to think of it as, I'll do it for this one thing and then I won't remember anything later, because it will be helpful for you regardless of what you go into work-wise, if you know how to do really good research. And you won't have access to CSUN resources after you graduate, but you will have access to public library resources, and maybe you'll be at a big company that has a corporate library. And it almost doesn't even matter if you're searching for a project or if you're shopping, you're searching for something to buy. The search strategy is the same. So, and I mean, gosh, I could talk about that forever, but I want you to think about how you're choosing keywords and how you're thinking about it, and less about kind of crossing things off of a list. Because I think you really do yourself a disservice if you just think of a project as a series of tasks rather than, kind of an end goal and a way to kind of shift your thinking. So with that being said, I am going to share my screen. And there's a kind of a main guide for your class. And I'm just actually going to go to the first part of this page here. So, oh my goodness, I don't know what happened. I don't know what happened to my guide there. Okay, here we go. So I am going to put this in the chat. And just one other note, if you don't remember how to get to the guide, and I should have mentioned this in the previous class, from the library homepage, if you go to Research Assistance and then go to Research Guides, that's where you'll see everything organized by department. And so this is a little bit funny because it's a business class and there's not actually a business department as far as I can tell. So this is actually going to fall under business and econ. But if you just scroll down, you'll see Business 491 CS, and that's your class. And I think this is just kind of useful to know about, because one of my favorite things about marketing is that it is very interdisciplinary. Business is very interdisciplinary. So I am only going to show you business databases, but there are all these other resources that you might want to consider. I mean, the first thing that comes to mind is psychology. If you really wanted to get into, how do consumers make decisions, behavior, stuff like that. Maybe you have a client that's big in tech, and it would be helpful for you to look at computer science databases. So all of these guides are available to give you kind of an overview. So, and I don't want to spend too much time on this, but let's just say for the sake of argument that you wanted to know in general, what kind of resources does the library have on computer science? So you don't have to choose something related to a class. You can just choose the department. And here you'll see, just some kind of general search strategies. But what I find to be super helpful is if you go to databases, you'll see all of the recommended resources. And some of these are actually super useful. And again, we don't have time to kind of get into them, but especially when I'm working with consulting students, whether they're undergrad or grad, I often find that there's really interesting stuff in this ACM digital library. And I don't know if you're at all kind of nervous about reading about, I mean, ACM is, I think, Association of Computed Machinery or something. It's an acronym that doesn't make a lot of sense. But if you don't have a strong computer science background, you might think, well, how am I going to read these conference proceedings? But they're actually written in a way that makes sense to lay people. Like, I can read about stuff that's happening, and from kind of a high level, I can understand what's happening. And they write about things like music and video games, or AI in different applications. And it's not all so in the weeds that you couldn't understand it. And I almost think it's kind of like a perfect gateway for people in business to just kind of understand what are computer scientists and people in tech talking about. So that's a very long explanation for how you find the guides, which again, you go to research assistants, research guides, and that's where you can find this guide and guides for all of the other departments that we have. And then just one other quick plug. If you click on databases from the homepage, it's a similar thing. We have 290 databases. No one is expecting you to explore all of them. It's not a good use of your time. And what I would recommend is get to know the databases in your major and in the class that you're taking. But again, if we were going to, stick with the computer science analogy, if I choose computer science, it gives me my recommended databases. So we have ACM Digital Library. We also have things like Science Direct. And then there's this collection by O'Reilly that has a lot of ebooks, and it's not limited just to computer science. There's actually a lot of books on business law and copyright, and there's all sorts of interesting things in here. So kind of two things. Don't go to all 290 databases, not a good use of your time. But if you just want to kind of explore by subject, I really encourage that, because the more creative you are and more open to learning about different disciplines, probably the better your project is going to turn out. Okay, so that's how you get to your guide. That's how you get to databases. And then let me get back to your guide here. Okay, so just a couple of things. If after today you need help, you can always email me directly through the guide. You can also schedule an appointment. These are primarily on Zoom. I am on campus a little bit, but I still have kind of a hybrid schedule. So all you would do is choose the time and date, and I'm only able to offer stuff kind of a week at a time, just the way my schedule is working out. But this is the same software that we use if you've ever booked a study room at the library. So you just choose a date and time, and then just indicate what class you're taking and what you're working on and what you need me to know. And for this class, I think there's only a couple instructors, but for some of the sections like Marketing 304, there's at least 5 or 6. So the more information you can give me, the better. And this is only going to me, and it's just to help me so that when we have our meeting, I'm kind of ready to go. I can pull stuff for you, and I'm ready to answer any questions that you have. So other things for the guide, we're not going to have time to look at all of these databases, but these are kind of like our main industry research and reports databases. So we are going to be looking at IBIS World and Mintel. We also have a number of different statistical databases. And then if you click here where it says government and project specific resources, ignore this part on the right. I haven't had a chance to update this. This is based on an old class, but we do have here government resources that might be helpful. And I wouldn't discount the government as a place to get information. Today, we're going to be focusing on library resources, but again, the government can sometimes have really good stuff. Okay, and I'm just looking at my notes. We talked about this a little bit in the previous class, but I would just encourage you, again, to be as creative and open-minded as possible. And keep in mind, there's a reason why a company or a business owner would seek consulting. It's usually because they're stuck in some way. They either want to have more customers, they want to figure out if there's a different product they could launch. So they're at least relatively open to a fresh perspective and new ideas. Again, depending on the client, you might not be able to hit them with the whole truth, but you can at least give them, some new ways of thinking about things. And yeah, again, I'm just giving you examples based on if I were in the class and I were working on this project, but there's always more than one way to do something. If you feel like you don't really agree with how I'm approaching it, it's completely fine. I'm just kind of swooping in and giving you suggestions, and you're not hurting my feelings by not using them. This is just one way of doing it. So, all right, so we're going to start with the flower industry people. And so here are some questions, and I'm not looking for you to answer them now. I'm just wanting you to kind of think about them. And afterwards, I'm going to be sending my working document that has everything. So you don't even need to write anything down if you don't want to. So, okay, so here are my questions. Who buys flowers and why? Is cost an issue? And then for you personally, how are you choosing a florist? Are you looking at the location? Are you considering the speed of delivery? Do you want to support a local company? That kind of thing. In terms of sustainability, are you considering where the flowers are sourced? Whether they're being, delivered by airplane? And I mentioned that because I had mentioned this in a previous class that had worked with a floral client. For a while, I was ordering flowers to send to my mom using BUQS, BOUQS, which is, I was really happy with them because it just seemed like they had really interesting flowers. It was just a little bit, and I don't know how else to explain it. It was a startup, and I thought that they were kind of doing things differently. I had ordered flowers for one, I don't remember if it was Mother's Day or my mom's birthday or what, but I ordered them and I was horrified because I got the tracking information and I saw that they were sending them from Ecuador, which I felt terrible because I just assumed that she lives in Oregon. I just assumed that they would, if they were going to ship them at all, it would be, within the state, or, sometimes with other online florists, you can indicate whether you want to have, a local company deliver them. And that was what the old FTD model was in the 80s. But anyway, I couldn't look at them the same. And I just felt so bad because I thought, so not only are these not at all local to where she lives in the Pacific Northwest, but just the fuel used to fly them over. I mean, I just was racked with guilt for a long time. So, and I just think with flowers, sustainability really needs to be at the forefront because you also have to consider you're sending cut flowers, that are basically dying as soon as they're cut. Okay, there's also the packaging, and then less with sustainability, but kind of more on the ethical front, how are the workers being treated? Because I know at least in some countries where they're really producing a lot of flowers, the people they're not treated much better than they would be if they were picking strawberries or working on a farm. So that's something to consider. I would want to think about, for something for you to potentially brainstorm would be, how could a flower supplier or a florist set themselves apart? So maybe they could focus on flowers that last more than a couple of days, or something that you could plant, or something that comes with seeds that then you could plant. I mean, I'm just off the top of my head. Maybe they're going to sell flowers or plants that have, healing properties. I know maybe 10 or 20 years ago, something that was kind of big in the industry was the idea of flowers that are good for offices, because there's something about the fluorescent lights, and there's different flowers that are, you know, plants that you can have that help with oxygen and help kind of reducing the toxicity from the light. I'm not remembering what kind of plants they are, but that could be something that a company would focus on. And for some people, you know, all flowers are the same. And then for other people, they want it to just be part of a bigger kind of gift package. Like, do they want to send them with balloons or with toys or chocolates or something? And then another thought that I had, and I feel like this is $1 million idea, I just have no idea how you would implement it, is when you're in a place like LA or New York, there's a huge flower market downtown. So people who run restaurants or are, you know, doing funerals or weddings can go to the flower market at 5 in the morning or 6 in the morning, whenever it opens, and they can just browse everything, and everything is fresh. They can meet the growers. I mean, it's just it. I've gone to the one in New York. I've not gone to the one in LA, but it just seems like this really magical kind of experience. So I'm just wondering, is there a way to somehow recreate that, but have it be virtual, or a way where you're picking something, but it's not just from pictures? I'm not really sure if that's making sense, but I just feel like there has to be a way that you can kind of recreate it, almost like if you were going to recreate the experience of a farmer's market, but online. That's my idea that I don't know how to implement. Okay, so just kind of keeping all that in mind, where would we start?
Can you explain this a little bit more? Because I think I'm not totally grasping what you're trying to say and so
Yeah,
on.
so I'm thinking normally when people send flowers, I guess they can do it one of two ways. You could go to a florist, but I feel like, is anyone doing that anymore? I feel like most people are just going online. So I've not been to a florist in years.
I think people still do, though. Next to the
Yeah, so I mean, that's a possibility. But I guess what I was thinking is, um, sorry, I feel like oh, here we go. I'm just thinking if there's some way to kind of explore something that's really grand. Like, maybe another way to think about it is, are you familiar with the Grand Central Market across from Angel's Flight downtown?
No, no, no.
So it's all these different food stalls. It was opened, I think, in the 20s, and then they kind of rehabilitated it maybe 5 or 10 years ago. And there's just dozens and dozens and dozens of places where you can get food. And it's very different from just ordering on an app. So I guess what I'm just thinking is there a way to somehow recreate the idea that you're going into this huge space where anything is possible, all the flowers are there, all the plants are there, you can talk to people, but if you were able to do that virtually, that's what I'm just imagining.
Like a metaverse of flowers.
Exactly. Yeah. But it's just something that I made up. So I don't even know if it's possible.
Well, but it's very good. Yeah. A metaverse of flowers.
Yeah.
Yes. And that was
yeah.
That was one of the options that was discussed by one of the paper, which said that they should really develop a platform which would become a hub where they would not be so much of a retailer, but they would be a platform that would be a B2B platform. And they would just create the B2B platform, but people would be buying the flowers from the suppliers through them, through that platform.
Okay.
Like an Amazon of flowers, where they don't, I mean, it would be different, but somewhat different, but where they would have no ownership of the flowers, but just the ownership of the management of the platform, and using the resources, and maybe being a B2B to start, so that way it would be easier for the suppliers, which are wholesalers or producers, to work with wedding planners or hotel chains, and those hotels could go there and say, oh, we need that much flowers for the weekend or for this,
right.
or funeral homes, but where they could be buying in half bulk, not in units, I mean,
Right.
there was all of these. So the students got the report from last semester. So they got quite a lot of opportunities and ideas, but they have to sort of flush them and reconsider them and
Yeah, I think
look at
that
what
is,
has changed.
yeah, I guess that is kind of what I'm thinking about because most flower markets are for business owners. They're not really for consumers. So that's why I was thinking
Yeah.
if there was a way to either move that online or to give a consumer that kind of experience, or it's almost like the Costco model, which, really used to be more for businesses, but now is, for consumers buying in bulk. I think it's just changing the way it's done. Or even if it were something like if you had an image of all of the different flowers that were available, and if you could almost, put your own bouquet together. I mean, I don't know. I'm just kind of imagining like you
Oh,
you
yeah.
could kind of personalize it. I don't know.
That's a good idea. I don't know if it already exists.
I mean, it probably does. I don't know.
It
I just
probably
was
does, yeah.
thinking I just ordered flowers for my husband's niece, and I I went with, I because I got burned with that Ecuador situation, I try to go for just, the local. I use 1-800 flowers, and I usually choose just the local option. And I always feel like I'm rolling the dice because I choose the one where it's going to be delivered and not flown in by a local florist, and then I just choose, they do the arrangement, and I know that they're experts, but the controlling part of me just feels like, oh, couldn't I just kind of indicate what flowers I would prefer? I don't know.
Yes, yes, I see what you're saying.
So just,
It's
something to think
not as
about.
personal.
Yeah. Um, so I don't know. Okay. So here's where I would start. I would start with one search, and you can even just start with things like, ooh, florists. And I know that that's a very broad search, but then you can, kind of immediately narrow it down and just see if there's something interesting. And there might not be. I mean, the first thing that comes up is the story of, I mentioned FTD, which evidently stands for Florist Telegraph Delivery. I never would have known that that's what that stood for. I knew that it was a way that you could order flowers by phone, and it was revolutionary at the time. I didn't realize that it stood for telegraph. So probably what I would want to do is if I wanted to see, stuff that's more recent, I would maybe bump this up to, 2015 to 2023, and just see if there's anything that seems kind of interesting. I don't know that there's too much. I might also want to add here. I'm going to lock my ears. I might want to add something like marketing. And I also don't want it to seem like it's super easy and I always find immediately what I'm looking for, because especially when I'm using one search, which is searching so many things, I usually have to kind of tweak my search to see if there's anything that's helpful. So this is something that I shared with the students last year. There's a video specifically on how one person was, disrupting the flower business. Keep in mind, this is from 2018. So, but this is the CEO of Farm Girl Flowers. So, you know what? It's only 3 minutes long. So that might be worth investigating. And it's kind of nice that it's only, it's a California company, and it might be sort of interesting to see what did she do to change flower delivery. And I got here just by doing florists and marketing. And then you can see there's, a couple of articles in terms of using social media. How did people kind of adapt to what do they have to do during COVID? And then I think it starts to kind of drop off, and you need to be sure that you don't give too much credence to some of these press releases. Like, it doesn't, I don't even have to read this. I'm just going to tell you this is going to be a complete waste of time. It's just a puff piece for Teleflora and how they were able to, they're spamming people so that they can, push more flowers. So I would just kind of explore and just see if there's anything useful. There's other terms that you can search for, which would be like cut flowers, flowers marketing. But I just like to kind of start with one search just to see if there's something kind of in general that might be interesting. And, who knows, if I take this out, there might actually be something super interesting if you wanted to look at some of these resources from the 60s and 70s. Like, it might be really interesting to know, how did FTD get started in 1960? I mean, it might be worth kind of knowing the history if you wanted to, break something now. So anyway, and again, if you don't find anything that's helpful, it doesn't, I'm not sure that it matters too much. I would just try this and then, check out some of the databases. So, and again, everything is going to be on the outline that I sent. So, and this was just one search, and I just entered my terms, and you can use it and see if there's anything that you like. So the next one that I would do would be Mintel. And that's our main market research database. And it doesn't have anything specific to flowers, but that doesn't mean that it doesn't have something useful. So the way that you can use this for flowers would be to consider, who are you trying to serve, or who do you think might be interested in purchasing flowers? So you could look at, here's where you can loop the sustainability back in. So if you buy my argument that maybe it doesn't make sense to fly in flowers to a market that already has a lot of them, you can take a look at, there's a 2023 report, it's actually from June, looking at, how do consumers feel about sustainable living? What does sustainability mean to them? And there's also this report on sustainability and online shopping. So those are just off the bat 2 different options that you have. The other thing you could do is, maybe you want to, market flowers or a flower service to a specific demographic. Like, maybe you really want to target millennials. So I can just enter in millennials, and I have 4 different reports to choose from. I have marketing to Black millennials, Hispanic, Asian, and millennials in general. And what I would say is, for something that is so general like this, you probably want to, read the executive summary, and then maybe look at some of these data points and just see, what are priorities to this particular age group. You can also, you can look at the report. What I like to do is look at some of these questions in the interactive data book, and then break them down by different demographics. So maybe we want to look at, gosh, which of the following have you ever done? And it's just things like, buying, posting on social media, buying something online. So that would be kind of important if you were really looking to, specifically market or sell flowers online. This is maybe not the best example of a question, but it kind of doesn't matter for what we're doing. So if we click on Explore Demographics, that's where you can break this down to see, what you're interested in. Because you can already see by gender and age, how did people answer this question? But then you can break it down further. So maybe you're wondering, well, how do people answer this question if they were based on their work from home status, or if they're parents, or maybe by, let's say, financial situation. And then you can look at the same question, which is, which of the following activities have you done? And you can look at everything, and then you can compare it by these different slots. So you can see, like, based on someone working entirely from home, how does that make a difference in terms of buying things online, managing their money online, posting on social media? And you can do that for any of the questions. And you can create graphs and tables. And I think for this particular project, and specifically for the flower groups, you might not get a ton from Mintel, but as long as you can just pull a couple of things, it might strengthen the argument, which is whatever you're trying to make to the client. So if you're trying to say, if we wanted to reach this particular demographic, this is how we reach them, you would want to have some data to back it up. And so that's how I think you could use Mintel specifically for the flower group. And it's going to be a little bit different for the music group. Okay, and I'm mindful, of course, that we have to, or that we're still going to talk about music. So I'm just going to show a couple of other things, and then we're going to transition over to music. And then I'm happy to take any questions, or talk about anything that would cover both teams. So again, this is Mintel, and we know that they don't have anything that's specific to flowers. So we were thinking about groups, and then also ideas like sustainability and and how people shop and stuff like that. Okay, so if you go to IBIS World does pretty well for flowers because this is an industry, it's an industry database. So you can just, you can look for, if you just start typing in florists, you can see you have a couple of different options. You have florists in the US, flower and nursery stock wholesaling, online flower shops, and then they also have a company benchmarking report for 1-800-flowers.com. Just realized what a strange company name that is, that it's a phone number and a website. Anyway, so if you click on florists in the US, the number here is the NAICS code. And so once you have that, you could actually use that in other databases. So, you know, if you were to search for that, say in Business Source Premier, that would be an easy way to just focus in on flowers. And what I would recommend is if you don't do anything else, just look at what these key takeaways are. You know, what does the revenue look like? It looks like business had, you know, the number of businesses was going down, but they anticipate that it's going to go up. And you can kind of look at, you know, what are the main products. So this is why I mentioned how important are these other pieces outside of flowers? Because if you look at this, arranged cut flowers make up 64% of the products, followed by 13% of just unarranged cut flowers, followed by potted plants, followed by giftware and other. And if you've ordered flowers recently, especially from a place like 1-800-Flowers, they're always trying to get you to add on other things. So that's what the giftware and other items are. And you can see, just like with the company that we were looking at in the previous, the industry that we looked at in the previous class, although 1-800-Flowers probably has the best brand recognition and they do have the biggest market share, it's 0.1%. It's 99.9% other companies. So you can kind of take that as, you know, as you wish. But here are some of the big drivers, which is consumer spending, demand from funeral homes, demand from wedding services. And here you have a SWOT for the industry as a whole. And if you look at opportunities, the main thing is high revenue growth and demand from funeral homes. I'm not sure why demand from wedding services is a threat, but I'm assuming if we went down further in the report, they would explain that because they can't just, you know, give you that and not offer any kind of explanation. And if you keep scrolling down, there's all sorts of different things that you can take away. You know, what are some of the competitors? I mean, in my opinion, the grocery store and Costco are going to be, they're really getting in there in terms of, you know, people buying flowers in person. So I take that back. I don't ever go to the florist, but if I need to grab flowers for an occasion, I would 100% just go to Costco. So anyway, you can just sort of keep scrolling down and you can see, you know, what's driving their opinion of the outlook. And here they're talking about younger clientele, people using Pinterest, florists using social media, and you can just keep going and going and going. I do want to draw your attention to a couple of different things here. If I just keep scrolling. Okay, so one is that you can look at things on a state level. So it looks like, yeah, it looks like California has the largest kind of share. And if you click on California, it will actually take you to the report that's just looking at California-based florists. So that could be kind of helpful to compare to the larger report. And you might want to also, you know, look at these other states that are big. So that's, I think, a good thing to look at. And then also, if you look at the call preparation tab, that's giving you a starting point. If it's assuming that you're working as a consultant, and these are questions that you could ask. So you could look at things like, how are you affected by the health of the US economy? How are you managing with online sales? How do you retain employees that have specialized knowledge? So there's all sorts of different things. So these are questions, you wouldn't have to ask all of them, but you could adapt them to, you know, specifically ask your client. So, and this is just one report. We just looked at florists in the US. It might also be worth looking at, like I said, the company benchmarking report for 1-800-Flowers, looking at some of these other reports that came up, like the wholesalers and the nurseries. There's just all sorts of different options. And they've recently just, if you have tried to use IBIS World in the past, they've completely changed their interface to make it less text dense and to make it a little bit more user friendly. And that was when I learned about the state level reports, because I just met with our rep who walked me through all of these new features and kind of explained to me the benefits of some of the different things here. Okay, so that's IBIS World. Just really quickly, I would always recommend, if you wanted to kind of figure out what's going on in the news in terms of your client, and again, this could be for either flowers or music, I would highly recommend looking at the Wall Street Journal and Financial Times, which now I realize are not linked here. So I'm just going to make a note to add those links. But if you go, and I'm actually going to put this in, hold on here. I'm going to put something else in the chat for you, because I just realized this is kind of a big thing not to have in there. We have a whole guide to finding news articles because it's a little bit complicated. So I'm just going to put that in the chat. So this is set up. So say, you're really only specifically looking at, you only want articles from the Boston Globe, or you only want articles from the Chicago Tribune, just for the sake of argument. This is how you would find out where those different resources are. And then we also have links for you to get set up with your free accounts with Financial Times and Wall Street Journal, and then also Newsbank California Collection. So those are a few that work a little bit differently. And I would recommend, even if you're only going to be at CSUN for another semester or two, go ahead and sign up for Financial Times, sign up for Wall Street Journal, and check out some of these more specific collections. And I would be shocked if there weren't articles about both industries in all three of these areas. And again, I will add them to your guide, but for now, I would just recommend checking out the guide that we have to finding news articles, because it's just, like I said, it's just a little bit complicated. Okay, so I'm going to switch over to music, and then whatever time we have left, because I know this probably seems a little disjointed. I'm happy to answer any questions, and then I'm also going to throw something in the chat, because I had hoped to talk to the flower people about a statista file, so I'm going to get that over to you. But first, I don't want the music people to get short shrift. Okay. So the first thing that I would recommend for the music clients is taking a look at a completely different guide, which is for it's for Music 580, which is the foundation class that the students in music administry, that's a new word, music industry administration take. And I thought it made more sense to share this than to try to move everything over to your guide, because there's a ton of information here. So I'm going to put this in the chat, and again, it will be on the document that I'm sharing with you. But there's just all sorts of information on titles that are specific to music business, like International Journal of Music Business Research. You have these news sources that I just mentioned, but then also things like Westlaw, because inevitably, if you're talking about anything with music business, copyright has to be at the forefront. And I know specifically for both of these clients, you would have to know at least a little bit about copyright, just to make sure that you're kind of doing things correctly. So I would you don't have to worry about, some of these things like the past thesis projects for MIA students, but I'm hoping if you're interested, you'll take a look at some of these kind of beginner titles, like on music publishing, licensing, copyright, stuff like that. So that's kind of where I would start. But what I am really excited about is, and you have no idea how lucky you are, there's a brand new report on Mintel. It came out last week on streaming music. I mean, it couldn't be timed any better. So I'm just going to go back in here. I haven't even had a chance to tell the head of the music industry program that it's here, because I think all of the students are going to want to check this out. So, and you may have noticed, so when you log on to Mintel, now it's been supplanted by health insurance, because this this report just came out, looks like on Friday, but this is the report that came out on Wednesday, streaming audio trends. So because before this, they hadn't really updated anything on streaming in at least a year and a half, something like that. So this is amazing. And it's not even limited to music. It's anything that's streaming. And this is, yeah, I mean, I don't seem excited because I'm a little bit tired, but this is really thrilling. And see, they've got stuff on pricing perceptions, how are people using free versus paid streaming audio, top platforms, what kind of content do they like? I mean, it's really incredible. And another thing that I hadn't mentioned when we are talking about flowers is one of the things that I think is so useful about Mintel is it gives you really nice examples of executive summaries and business reports, because even if you've studied business for a long time, you might still feel a little bit like you don't really know how to write a good executive summary, or you don't maybe know the difference between a research paper that you're turning in for a grade versus a report that you would give your boss, if that makes sense. So, and I think, again, one of the things that I really like about business classes is you're learning skills that you can use essentially in any industry, and business writing is a special skill. Excuse me. So not only are you getting really great data and information, but you're getting examples of what does a nice executive summary look like. So anyway, you have all of this information. I mean, 9 out of 10 people listen to streaming audio. That's huge. That has to have changed just a lot, even in the last few years. How much are people willing to spend? Are people willing to spend more to eliminate ads? How's the technology changing it? And here saying that AI is going to replace algorithms to predict how can people stay longer on a platform. Seeing the value in a paid subscription. So there's just so much stuff here. And here they have all the opportunities. So potential for partnerships, connecting someone with the creator, which I kind of feel like makes sense for both of the music clients. Just all sorts of amazing things here. You've got your fast facts. I mean, I haven't even had a chance to really dig into this that much, but I'm so thrilled for you that it's here, because it was sort of, honestly, it was sort of bothering me that there hadn't been anything a little bit newer. So, so you can definitely look at that. And again, you can do the same things where you're looking at the data book, because you can see exactly, what people were asked. So here, what kind of streaming do you listen to? Which providers have you used? What do you pay for? How often are you listening to it? And again, you could do the same thing, which is break it down by demographics. So is there a difference for, does age play a role in whether you're willing to deal with ads? I would assume that it would. And, what are you doing when you're listening to music? So, and this I think could be interesting, because isn't one of the clients specifically designing content that's supposed to be relaxing? Isn't that one of the clients?
Yes, exactly. Like a reggae type of music.
Yeah. So, and you can see one of the options, we've got exercising, relaxing alone, going to sleep, so you just, that seems like I would want to know I mean, I would be shocked if someone I'd be horrified if someone used an audiobook to go to sleep, but I guess it's possible. But it just could be kind of interesting to see what you do. And I don't know when I was reading about that, when I thought about the idea of something relaxing, it made me think of meditation apps and things that you use to unwind, and if there's a possibility for collaboration there. But I just think there's so much just amazing data in here, and I haven't even had a chance to really dig into it. So I just was so tickled when I saw that this came up, and that there were at least 2 business clients, and it almost makes up for the fact that there's not a nice report about flowers. So, yeah. And then the same rules apply. So you already have this amazing report, but you could also still look at things like, okay, how do I market to, specific demographics, and how do I consider things like, so maybe you could do demographics, you could also do, yeah, trend drivers. Like you could look at, what kind of reports do they have on technology, on experiences, on well-being. There's all sorts of different things. And I think you just have to keep in mind there's not always going to be an amazing report like this that kind of fits all of your needs. So if it doesn't seem like there's something, just think if there's anything else that you would want to know about. So imagine that there weren't a report on streaming. There's other things that you could look for. Like you could look at, well, how do different demographics react to new trends or new technologies, or what's important to them, or how can they be marketed to? Because there's still, even if you didn't, I mean, it's amazing that you have this, but even if you didn't have that, there's other stuff that you can find in here. And you could even look at something like, I just think this report on recovery and reset is basically valuable for anything, regardless of what you're trying to sell or research, because it's a huge deal that COVID is maybe almost over, and people are at least a little bit kind of returning back to things. They're going to games, they're going to concerts, they're going to restaurants. And how are people feeling about that? How do things like inflation and a potential recession affect their spending and their activities? So I think there's a way to kind of make that work. Maybe not, you know what, I don't think the body care and deodorant is going to work, but I just think a lot of these different, you could almost make any of these reports work, at least in one small way. And this is just, if you just kind of scroll down, these are the latest things to come out. So they're just kind of like little teasers. So you can always search by keyword. You can filter by any of these different categories. And I just think if it seems like there's not really anything that's super relevant, just give it a few more minutes and just do a little bit of searching. I'm confident that most of the time there's at least something in Mintel that you can use. I just know that sometimes people find it frustrating because it's not like IBIS World where you type in your industry and it just gives you everything that you need, because it's based on reports that their analysts are working on. And they don't, if you, they also have other products where if CSUN contacted them and said, what, we would really like this report on, I don't know, like some new idea that we had, or we wanted them to do something, we would have to pay extra for that. So that's why if this seems like it doesn't feel tailor-made to you, it's because it's not. This is what they're offering their academic clients. Okay, so that's the streaming report that's in Mintel, which again, you're not going to do much better than that. If we go back to IBIS World, there is actually a fair amount on music, and you're going to learn more than you ever wanted to in terms of, music publishing, independent labels, musical groups. Let's see. I think probably your best bet is going to be music streaming services. I sort of feel like that's going to be the most relevant, although, if you were interested, you could look at some of these benchmarking reports. It's hard because these companies are kind of specific, but I know that you can still make this work. And, the same kind of thing, it's really like a lot of the other industries where there's a couple of players that are kind of dominating it, but at least it's not, at least it's not 99% other companies. It's actually 75% are these big four companies, and then it's 25% that are other companies. But I would just, kind of follow the same idea where you're looking at the SWOT analysis for the industry as a whole and thinking about how you could connect that to your specific client. You can look at these questions, you can look at the statistics, you can look at what the competitive forces are, you can look at what the different products are. And again, if you were interested, you can look at it, you can look at some of these larger companies. I mean, they're not going to be the same. It's like David and Goliath in terms of the size, but I think it still could be useful to know, okay, if I have this small company that wants to do kind of a really niche product, it's probably worth knowing what is Spotify doing with that particular area. So if say I were kind of sticking with the meditation idea, I'm confident that Spotify probably has music for meditating, or they might even have short meditations. They're at least approaching it. I think at the very least, I could probably find something that has new age. And certainly Apple they have short meditations, but it's not going to be anything like a specific app, like a Calm or a Headspace or something like that. So it's all about using these resources and just kind of, comparing what we have. So again, all I did was I just started typing in music and all of these different things popped up. And then I can add music streaming if I want, and I can look at the benchmarking. So now for the benefit of both groups, because I didn't have a chance to do this for flowers, I'm just going to quickly show you Statista, which is a database that we only got over the summer. So let's see here. Sorry, I lost my LibGuide here. Okay, so under mapping and geographic databases, it's on the bottom here. And Statista is honestly just amazing. So I'm actually going to pivot back to flowers and just show you what happens if I search for flowers. And you can see as this comes up. Okay, so we get 1,500 results, and not a huge surprise. We come up first with flower market in the Netherlands, and then Colombia, and then Germany. So we probably don't want to focus too much on that. So what I can do is simply say, you know what, I really am only interested in what's happening in the United States. And that will get rid of the Netherlands and Germany and all that other stuff. And then I can look at things like, expenditures for Mother's Day flowers, retail sales of flowers. And then I can also, here this is sorted by relevance. I can sort it by date of publication, and then just kind of scroll through and see if there's anything that's interesting. So here, maybe I want to do, just to show you as an example, Mother's Day flower expenditure 2007 to 2023. And you can see it's just continuing to go up. And then they have, other related topics. They've got different demographics. And then here we've got, this is maybe not as relevant. I don't know that I would want to look at gardening equipment and plants, but maybe you're interested in that. And then it's giving you other reports that you might want to look at. And I'm going to give you in the sheet that I give you, there's a whole link to all of these different reports that I found. And this is not even maybe the best example. It's just one of the things that comes up, but you can see it comes up under shopping behavior. So let me just see if I can tighten up the search just a little bit. Retail sales of the US flower industry. We've got flower gardening. Here's another one, and I'm sure that we could find a newer one. I just for the sake of expediency, I'm just going to show you this report from 2019. What are the best-selling cut flowers? Tulips by a nose, and then it kind of goes down. I'm actually kind of surprised that roses aren't more popular, but we could also look at other dates. You can download that, and then you can see what other reports do they have? What how much did people spend for? Gosh, yeah, U.S. floral department sales growth by region, dollar share sale of plants and flowers. There's just all sorts of different things that you can search for. And this, I mean, you can search for whatever you want. They also have these really nice reports. So we could see if they had a consumer report on how people are spending on flowers. And you should be okay. What they do with the reports is they'll say that the report is $495 and that's crossed out and it's zero for you because you're a CSUN student. If you ever run into something where it looks like you're going to be asked to pay, I would just stop and ask me, and I'll see what happens there. Okay, so that was just a super quick. We just did a search on flowers. We could do the same thing for music. And if you type in music, you can see it tries to help you in a lot of different ways. So you can do music industry, streaming, festivals, sales, digital, Apple Music. So maybe I want to do music streaming. And I can see what comes up. So we've got streaming worldwide, digital music, market data and analysis, weekly music streaming. We've got a report on the music industry. I mean, and then if you if you were in the music industry program, you would likely want to look at, well, what were the most popular songs in 2022, just based on the number of streams. But just to show you kind of overall, if we went into music streaming worldwide, you can just see all of this just different information. And you can see Spotify is the most popular service, you know, worldwide. It's a $17.5 billion industry. There's all sorts of stuff. And we could even look at, digital music in the United States. And then they give you all of the different statistics. So that was just looking at statistics. We can also go into reports and see. If I just put in music, it'll show me everything that they have specifically as a report versus statistics. So then you've got music streaming services worldwide, music industry worldwide. Okay, so here's an example. This is a 31-page report, and see how they're showing you that it would be $495, but you're saving all of this money by being a CSUN student, and then you can download it. There we go. Sorry, I'm impatient and I'm clicking too much. Okay, so here's our report. And it's just showing you how the revenue is going up and up and up, and that the growth worldwide had been going down. And then just looking at how streaming varies based on generation, how many people are subscribing to services, what kind of platforms are people using. So all sorts of different things that you can use. And again, they're going to highlight Spotify because it's the biggest one. And how is it, people doing premium versus ad supported. And I didn't mention this yet, but I did just want to point out that it can be a little bit confusing. And I'm also going to add this to your guide as well. It can be a little bit confusing how to cite everything. So what I'm going to do is add what we have on the marketing guide. So just to show you really quickly, and again, I'm going to fix this. I have a couple of these APA 7 guides that are specifically for business, because I don't know about you, but I don't find it at all intuitive to cite a Mintel report or to cite a Statista report. So if you use one of these guides that are linked, you can just, my goodness, okay, sorry, I'm going to go into the other one here. If you choose one of these business guides, you can just scroll down and choose what you need. So say, say that you're citing something from Mintel or IBIS. Again, it goes through all of the big ones that you would potentially be using. So, and it goes on and on and on and on, but that's how you would do it. And I know that IBIS is in the process of adding some sort of resource so that it's easier to cite, but they don't have anything right now. So, oh my goodness. So I'm so sorry. I went over time and I don't know that I covered everything that I wanted to, but I'm going to stop sharing. And do I have time to take any questions?
Yes, you do. You do.
Okay.
I was just setting a time for you to work with, but it's not like it doesn't have to be precise. We're
Okay.
100% precise at 7. So
Okay.
yes. Any questions? I was looking in the chat, but I did respond to one, I think, while you were presenting. Any questions to Lindsay? So yes, very good. You found some reports. That's going to be very helpful. What's interesting for the students to understand is that for them to give a good answer, it cannot be just existing data that they can use in order to make the argument.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes if the data does not exist, or if the data is missing, as having gaps, and also I think most of the time it's very rare that you can come up with something disruptive or something extremely valuable just from published data. Oftentimes it comes from a combination of data that you have to collect and data that is existing, and sometimes you use existing data because it's more, it's a bigger numbers, so it's more quantitative, to make a bigger argument of the small data that you found. So you find something yourself, asking a question through a few interviews, and then this gives you a direction, and then you find that this direction is backed up by the large reports that just happened to be published a week ago, and there was hundreds of thousands of data points and so forth. Then it's great. But to rely on those published reports in order to make something very disruptive, it's rare. And the reason also is that these are standardized reports. This becomes sort of the standard. Everybody's looking at them. It makes it difficult for you to really differentiate yourself from that. In addition, I believe that those reports are not going to dare saying something that is extremely disruptive as well. So you'll have to see that they're going to try to be politically correct. I don't know if that's the word, but to be appropriate. And
I think kind of they would err on the side of being conservative.
Conservative, exactly, that's the word. Yeah, they would be conservative. And so that's why if you're a big company and you take this, then you have a qualitative research that follow up from this to verify some things and maybe find something that is not in the report, that then you go and look for quantitative research to identify this with more certainty. But what's great is to see the mixture of this. And so I haven't spent some time talking about the difference between quantitative and qualitative research, but I very much recommend that you do qualitative research because of the time that we have. We don't have time to do 200 surveys and all people being surveyed and all this. And anyway, the time it takes to develop a good survey requires to do a good interview or many good interviews before you can do the survey. So you barely have the time to do a bunch of quality interviews that may allow you after that to do a quality survey. But since you barely have the time for the quality interview, you might as well just do quality interview. I don't have to do hundreds of people being surveyed with a bunch of questions that you just made up. So I'm going to repeat myself about this because from my experience, the students, they think that the larger the number of people being asked questions, the better the data. But if you rushed through collecting this data, whatever the people are going to say and the method you're going to use to collect information and evaluate the answers and interpret, and it just doesn't make any sense because it's going to be a fast job. So having said that, that doesn't mean that you don't want to go through those databases because you may interpret what I said that you don't find a lot of disruptive things in there. No, you want to go in this because it's like a tandem. It's a tandem between speaking to the customers and a tandem from looking at quality reports that have been produced. And it's the tandem of these two things that it eventually gives you an idea that is disruptive. And then you have to sort of defend this idea with further data in order to defend it. So that's the exercise. Is then you sort of turn into a lawyer trying to defend your idea. And so therefore you need to go back. So it's not like you go through the database, and once you finish with the database, that means you're never going to go back there. Then you do your qualitative research, and then it's going back and forth between all of these. So learning where they are, what they are, and how to manipulate them is very important because you're going to go back and forth between, databases, interviews, databases, interviews, ID, databases, interviews. So it's very iterative, and sometimes it's stressful and makes the students anxious because they think they're going backwards by doing something again that they've done before, and that doesn't mean you're going backwards. So do you have any questions for Lindsay? Because I know she's been working off hours, and she's wonderful very much to give her time off hours of the library to come and help us. So it's awesome. But I'd love to hear you if you have questions. And this is not a shy bunch of students, so I'm surprised there's no one asking questions. Maybe the question is when do you expect to send us your little recap? Tomorrow?
Yeah, I'll send it in the morning. That's right.
Okay, awesome. So then I will send to the students. I will post it on Canvas.
Okay.
And and that would work. Thank you very much for your time.
Yeah, thank
We
you.
enjoyed all these different things, and the students have quite a lot of work because these are very special clients with special industries. You already worked on Help Us, that was probably in February or something like this, with the flower client. So this is a follow-up that I'm doing from 165 students. Then it's condensed to a small.
Wow.
And so they had to look at, we had 27 reports, and they're looking through this and coming up. And things have changed since then.
Oh, I'm
And
sure.
so,
Yeah.
so we have to adjust with that as well. And I mean, that's real life of a business consultant.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Collect data, adjust, learn, come up with something
Mhm.
better that was said before. Go to the meeting with the client, discuss with the client. Excellent. Thank you, Lindsay. Thank you for joining
Yes,
us
thank you
tonight.
so much. And for everyone, if you think of questions, you can email me, and I'm easily reached right through the guide. So
And it's very possible as well that the students will try to reach out with you to make an appointment and then do a specific. We have 4 groups, so there may be a group that wants to do that.
sure.
And
Yeah.
so that's something that happens very often. So that would be great. Take advantage of the nice people we have on campus that wants to help.
Absolutely. All right. Well, thank you,
Thank you.
everyone.
Thank you for your help today with my 2 classes.
You got it. And I'll see you soon.
See you soon.
Okay.
Bye-bye, Lindsay.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, very good. Well, you've been very quiet tonight. Normally, you have much more voicing yourself and asking questions. Anyway, so what I want to do now, maybe you have a question for me. One thing I would like to do is next week I will meet with the 2 music groups, and we will be looking at the opportunities that you have identified. What I would like as well is to get a recap from the group 1 and the group 2. And so the recap is essentially next week we'll be in class, and we will have a presentation from the 2 groups that didn't present, so group 1 and 2, and then I will meet with group 3 and 4. But while I meet with group 3 and 4, it can be done before that. Work on the side and send me a recap by 8:45, 9 o'clock. A recap where the most important piece is the SWOT analysis, and the most important piece are the section about the opportunities. So what I'd like to see, and I already saw this pretty much last week because you already worked on that, is to have a number of bullet points that would show what you think are the opportunities, and rank these and email me these at the end of the class, at the end of the 8:45, or you could email me before if you wanted to, but since you will be we will be in class, and then you'll have a time to meet with your groups, you may as well use this time to beautify and perfect this document while you are there all together, and by 8:45 just email it to me, and then I will give you some feedback as soon as possible. So that way we don't have too many weeks that go by without me giving you some feedbacks, because we do need to identify those opportunities as soon as possible. And once they identify, it becomes much easier. Okay. Do you have any questions? All right, excellent.
Is
So,
that for all groups? But
no, so next week there are 4 groups. We have 4 groups, and next week there's only 2 groups that I'm going to meet with, group 3 and 4. But the group 1 and 2 will be presenting, so it's the same thing that we did a week ago, where there's 2 groups that present, then 2 groups that I meet with. So it's the opposite. So the group that I will not meet with, which is 1 and 2, the groups that will be working on the flower clients, I'm asking them by 8:45 to just send me a recap, a summary, and it can be 1 slide where it says the 1 slide about the opportunities, or it could be 3 slides of opportunities or whatever, and that way I can give you some feedback. So it's not all groups, because there's 2 groups that I'm going to meet where I'm going to give you feedback right then at the time of the meeting, So group 3 and 4. So you don't have, you could send me if you wanted your document to review. There's no problem with this, but I'll be doing it live with you at the time of the class. Did I answer your question?
Oh yeah, thank you.
So I want to keep going on looking at concept. You should be able to see my screen right now. Oh, you don't? Okay, so I have to do the share. So the one quote I think is very interesting is this one. It's, so I tell you, ask and it will be given to you. Seek and you will find. Knock and the door will be open to you. For everyone who asks, receive. He who seeks finds, and to him who knocks, the door will be opened. And so I don't show religious, I don't use religious quotes very often. It's not like that's what my favorite. It's just this one I thought was very interesting, because why do you think this is interesting, and why would this one be interesting in business? Why would this be an important quote for a business person?
I think it's important to take risks. I think that's what it's saying. It's important to take risks, and it's important to go looking for information.
Yeah, so it's important to take risks. So why do you think it talks about risks? Is it like knocking at the door? Is if you don't knock at the door, you don't take risks? There's an element of risks. The issue here is the issue of initiatives. You know, the issue of initiatives is how could people expect anything to happen to them if they don't do anything? How could people expect that more happen to them if they don't do more for more to happen to them? There's sort of a cause and effect in life, and there's a cause and effect in business. Is, you know, for everyone who asks, he will receive. And so I think this is very, very important, and it's sort of so basic. I think a 10 years old can understand it, but it's very funny because it's not very applied very often. I see a lot of people, they expect results. You know, it's like people, they expect to have a lot of muscles and they don't go to the gym. If you go, the more you go to the gym, the more you get muscles. The more you go to school and study, you don't have to go to school, but the more you study, the more you'll have knowledge. And because at the end, what I notice is 24 hours for everyone. This is something we're all equal, but how do we spend the 24 hours is very different. And so the strategy and the initiatives that you have within this 24 hours is what also has an impact on where you start and where you end, because the initiatives makes a big difference. The initiatives in terms of the quality of the initiatives, the quantity of the initiatives is not just the quantity and not just the quality, but it's the combination of quantity and quality of initiatives. So the more events you go to, the more likely you will be networking. The more investors you ask to invest in your business, the more likely that you're going to have investors investing in your business. So if you don't ask, you don't get. And I believe this is very important. I've seen a lot of people being successful because they were asking more than other people. They were asking more to the world. You know, it's the world is there and is for everyone to ask. So initiative is very, very important. And so I wanted to bring this concept of initiatives. And so obviously here it could be a little bit the same. Is the more you research, the more likely you will find something. The less you research, the less likely you will find. So it's, you know, it's one of those religious quotes that has so much meanings that it takes a while to interpret it, and it's exciting. So hopefully I was able to get you to think that way, that the more initiative, the more you get. The more you invest, the more you're likely to get back. You know, it's the more you seed, the more likely you'll have food to eat. The less you seed, the less you'll have food to eat. So going to do a degree, going to the university, it's sort of seeding, and therefore you should be harvesting something more than someone that didn't. Now, I always like to go back to this: is what is marketing? It's generating satisfaction for a specific customer, and eventually making a profit and being long term. Being long term means that you building a relationship with that customer. So marketing is therefore looking at this environment and digging into the environment for some opportunities. That's what you're doing, and I just want to keep repeating it. Opportunities are facts. Opportunities are not what you are going to do, just facts. Facts that you can take advantage of. And so these facts that you can take advantage of, they go inside the SWOT. And the SWOT is made of internal versus external components. You have control over the internal, means you can change your weaknesses into strengths and you can maintain your strengths, but you cannot generate opportunities or you cannot generate threats. You just understand what they are and then you build some strength in order to manage those opportunities and those threats. Okay, so this reminds me of those companies that take advantage of the world that is changing. And so this company, Manscaped, are doing this. They're using different lotions, they're using different cosmetics, different type of shavers, because men have developed different interests in the way they want to shave, the way they want to look, where they want to shave, and what they want this to look and all that. So it's very important. It reminds me of a project that I did when I was a student in the 90s. And I was doing this project to get my first bachelor. And when I did this project, we were given, the company was Gillette. And at the time, we were all working on the next generation of Gillette razors. And at the time, there was a product called Gillette Sensor. And I think the students were supposed to create what was to be called Gillette Sensor XL, XL2, XL3, Turbo XL, Turbo whatever. And that's what you are supposed to do by having two blades and then a third blade and then a fourth blade and eventually a fifth blade. But when I looked at the environment, we had a case study and I read this case study, and somewhere in the case study I read that there was a number of guys that were complaining that their girlfriend was borrowing their razors and they couldn't find new razors because they were all used by their girlfriend or their wives. And this was buried inside the database. And it got me interested to search more about this concept. So I did interviews about women using razor blades. So this was in 93, I think. And so in 93, when I produced this report and gave it to my professor gave me maybe a 72 or 73. So I sort of failed. And then I went to see the professor and I asked, why did I get such a bad grade? And the professor, why do you think the professor gave me a not good grade for this report, where I was telling him that Gillette should be making a razor not for men, but for the girlfriend and the wives, which were borrowing the men's razors, and that it should be a different razors because women are different and they want to shave different places and they want a different result and all this. Why do you think that the instructor gave me a C minus?
Maybe because the razor has the same functionality, whether it's man or women, and that companies definitely thought about that before.
Yeah, because it's just a razor, so it's just about cutting. So it's like he thought there was just no reason for a different razor. There was not such a thing as a gender specific razor. I mean, it's like there's not such a thing as a gender specific car, or there's not a gender specific movie, he was thinking. And also because he was reading his Harvard case study, and when you're a professor and you do a Harvard case study, there is a bunch of documents to be read by the students, and then there's a answer sheet for the professor to read, which are the expected answers from the students. And the expected answer back in '93 that Gillette should go into the women razors was not an option because it didn't exist. In '93, you went to the store and there was not such a thing as a pink razor or a Venus by Gillette, you know, that didn't exist. There were men razors, and if women were using it, that was not something that anyone was really talking about, or there was nobody really focusing on that product. Therefore, my answer was out of the scope of the answers provided inside the case study. And therefore, the professor, even though I was telling the professor that there was this discussion about the fact that some men were complaining about the fact they couldn't find their razors, or they had bought some new razors, but there was none left because they were all used by their wife or girlfriend, was a hint that there was further research that needed to be done just to see if there was some kind of new trend for women to want their razor. But then once the women would say they would want their razors, would there be a difference between what they would want? Like maybe they would say, well, I'm using my boyfriend razor, is really good, but this and but that and but this, which in itself creates an opportunity for a brand to come and say, hey, we're going to be the first brand to make a gender-specific razor, because when we ask the consumers, their satisfaction is not good because the razors they're using is unfortunately not the appropriate razors for the needs that they have, for the want that they have, and therefore they are unsatisfied. And I'm in the business of satisfying, and therefore I will find a better razor if women don't think that the current razor are too much for men and they are not applying to them. So that's what happened. What happened is there's no such a thing as a chat GPT for opportunities. There's not such a thing as you know, the correct answer based on a database. There's no correct answer based on a Harvard case study. I mean, that's as far as everyone knows. But once you start getting new data, with new data, whatever we were thinking before may not be true today. New information may change perspectives. New information may make people that believed something was X, suddenly it's not X anymore, it's Y, because with the new information, they change. So the idea of being in business is the idea of constantly embracing new information in order to make better services, better products for the customers to be more satisfied. That was the point I was trying to make here, is that that's what you're doing. You're a consultant, you're trying to find this. So I created this document called the OIST, and it's this document about the good and the bad opportunity. The OIST is pretty practical. And so I recommend you to pay attention to the OIST. The OIST is a document that is available online. I may have even emailed it to you, or I discussed it. So let's look at the OIST just for a second. So I call it the OIST because oftentimes when people think about something, doing something different and better, they think of an ID. So it's like me working on this project for Gillette, and I'm supposed to add a blade, a third blade, because there was 2 blades at the time. I think there was 3 at the time, actually. And so I was supposed to add a 4th blade, you know, 1 more blade so people could cut themselves with it. No, I thought it had to be something bigger than just keeping adding blades to the razor, or another accessory on the razor, or a head that would pivot even wider or sideways, or I don't know what it was. I had to think about something else. So when I read this thing that these guys were complaining about their missing razors because of the girlfriend taking it away, that gave me an idea. So the concept is oftentimes starts with an idea, and then people think of tactics. So the most common way, it's ITOS or ITSO, ID, tactics, opportunity, strategy, or ID, tactics, strategy, opportunities. That's what that's the way it's developed 99% of the time, and that's probably the way you're developing it too. However, to present it, you don't want to present something that is too focused on the ID. The ID is interesting because you can always pitch it, but what makes it valuable is the quality of the opportunities. So to make it even better, you start talking about the opportunities, then you explain from these opportunities what could be the ID. So that's broad and overview and summarized. And then you explain what's the strategy, and which is the big direction. And then you explain what's the tactics, which are the actions that will be implemented in order to satisfy the long-term direction, which is the strategy. So the OIST is a very simple presentation, which goes from the overall opportunity. So the overall opportunity is the broad opportunity. The broad opportunity could be that more and more people are buying flowers because they're getting married, and more often than before. I mean, you find this data. So that's great, but it helps the entire flower industry. It doesn't help specifically what this client is trying to do, which is consulting in the flower industry. So it's a sort of a broad, sort of a generic, sort of a, not too specific enough, not strategic enough for your specific client. So that's the overall opportunities. You can talk about overall opportunities, you can rank them, they're acceptable, if they're correct, it's good, but they're not super helpful. The ones that are super helpful are the specific opportunities. So the specific opportunities are going to be really helping, like in particular, your client, and they're going to put them into a growth, immediate growth and sustainable growth. Then, once you've identified the big opportunities and the specific opportunities, then you talk about the idea that what could you do with these opportunities? And so then you move into the strategies, which should be explaining the definition of the strategy that you will be using for the next year or the next 2 years. And then you can start talking about some tactics, but it's going to be many more tactics. You could have one strategy and 25 tactics. So there's no limits to how many tactics you should have, because there are as many as you can think in terms of detailing your plan. Versus a strategy, you could have just one. Do you have any question on the OIST? Should you use the OIST? I think you should. Going to the exercise of the opportunity ID, strategy, and tactics is going to help you better prepare how you will sell this on the day of the presentation. You know, that's just sort of your tactic to better sell what you want the clients to do. Any questions? Okay, so I go back to the OIST. No, I don't want this one. This one, okay. So I go back to the presentation. And so having a OIST plan is very important. Now I want to move into this. What does a business need the most? Money, market research, help, time, or a solid business plan? What does the business need the most?
Time.
Which one?
C or D, time.
Why you think time?
I just think in a lot of cases it's the limiting factor of a business operation.
So you think they don't have enough time?
Yeah, I think with enough time you could accomplish anything. So
okay. And usually the businesses, do they want to do things faster or slower?
faster.
faster, yes. So 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 time may be an issue when the owner of the business getting older, and where they see that they have money, they've done very well, they have a market research team, they have thousands of employees, they have business plan, but what they have missing is the fact that they are 95 years old and they have to give the business, sell the business, or give the business to a family member, and they know this family member is not that good, and they wish they had more time. Maybe that situation, why I say that is because I've seen it, and I mean, I've seen it many times, and I'm seeing it every week with the people, some of the people I work with. So it's true that some businesses, the owner may answer time as being the thing that they need the most, but let's say you're starting your own business tomorrow, or you have an idea of business. What is it that's making it the most difficult? That you don't have time, that you don't have money, that you don't have research, that you don't have any help, or you don't have a business plan? What do you think?
Can I say that maybe this is one of those things where it just depends?
Well, again, it depends, because like the example I gave you, it could be time.
Yeah, exactly. Or if you're starting a business, somebody might need money, but there could be somebody who's, I don't know, a millionaire and they're starting a business and money isn't their problem.
That's right. So it all depends, because if you say, oh, I'm going to do a business, which is going to be to sell candy, versus you say, oh, I'm going to do a business where I'm going to be selling planes. Obviously, that's a big difference. Like I was speaking to someone yesterday, and they said they wanted to start a business as a realtor, but the best profits as a realtor was to sell mansions, huge mansions, houses over $10 million. That's where you make the most profit. But when you start as a realtor, it's a big problem, because you don't have the money to sell those big houses, because it takes a longer time and more networking and more resources. So they're going to start selling more affordable houses. So it's true that oftentimes in questions you can say it depends, but then in this situation you want to think about the most common pain businesses have. And if you listen to some famous YouTubers or social media entrepreneurs, is they will always say, always, 99% of the time, say that money and time are not the hardest thing in business. They will often, 99% of the time, say that junior entrepreneurs always say, I don't have the time, and that's why I don't take care of this business. My biggest problem is the time, and blah, 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 and all this. And some other people would say, my biggest problem is the money and all this. But when you speak to those successful entrepreneurs, they would oftentimes say that was not their biggest problem, because the time, that's all they wanted to do. So they gave huge amount of time, and they were very dedicated, and that was not the problem. The problem was not the money, because eventually if you have a good idea backed up by your opportunities, you find people that want to make money, and they are all looking for a way to make a better interest and return on investment. And then you say help. Well, that's kind of a big problem, because finding good people is very difficult. And it's oftentimes, if you think if help is people, that would be the hardest thing. But then if you say market research is also very important, because if you are making decisions and you don't know the pros and cons of your decisions, you don't know the weight of your decisions, then it's not very good. And then you say, but what about E? E is a solid business plan. Isn't it a business plan, a plan that highlights the budget, so the money, highlights who does what, so the help, when do they do what, is the time, and also what are the opportunities and what are what are your forecasts and what do you anticipate. So that's the market research. So what a business needs the most, if you really think about it, is a solid business plan, because a solid business plan is actually all of these A, B, C, D at the same time. It's planning. So planning is very, very important. And that's what business needs the most. Not continuous planning where all you do is plan and never do anything, because that's procrastination, but planning for the sake of knowing that the less you plan, the more likely it's going to happen not what you wanted. And the more you plan, the more likely, it's not 100%, but the more likely that what will happen is what you have planned. So a solid business plan is very important. And inside the solid business plan, you will have some research. Does this make sense? Or anyone wants to comment on that, or maybe add to it, or have a different perspective? Okay, so I will look at what's market research. And so we started looking at this with Lindsay today, because she came with some market research for us. So the definition of market research is collecting data for the sake of making better decisions. The problem is you don't want to just collect data and do nothing. And that's a problem that happens in big businesses. You want to collect data because you have either a problem you want to solve, or you want to identify a change and then turns these changes maybe into a problem or a solution. And then you want to look to how to take advantage of it. So now when you do research, there's a process, which is first define the problem. And that's the hardest part, the first part. The second part is develop the research plan. How are you going to find responses to your questions? What method you're going to be using? And that's not too difficult. But with a little bit of experience, you starting to become very good at developing the research plan. Defining the problem requires a lot of experience. So the thing that requires the most experience is one, defining the problem, and then the fourth, interpreting and reporting the findings. So interpreting and reporting the findings is different. Interpreting requires a lot of experience, but reporting maybe requires a little bit of less experience and just the right experience in reporting. Some people are very good at reporting very quickly. They are natural writer of reports or natural public speakers, and therefore it's sort of less difficult, less experience. It's just natural. But interpreting is not totally natural, as you have to have done it a number of times. You have to sort of read between the lines and see that what people are saying may not be what they mean. And so that's more difficult. There's sometimes interpretation that needs to be done at the time of the collection. So again, I mentioned interviews before, and when you do an interview, you are collecting data, but at the same time, you have to interpret what people are saying in order to ask new questions that you didn't think about before. Direct people within this interview. So the hardest thing first is to define the problem and the objective of the research, because it could be very broad. The problem is not always what should we do in order to increase sales. Sometimes the problem is not that you're not selling a good product, is that you're not using a right distribution. Or maybe the customers you're trying to sell the product is the wrong customer. So there's nothing wrong with the price, nothing wrong with the product, nothing wrong with the distribution channel. What's wrong is the target that you have identified to be the target where you sell the product. So defining what's the problem is difficult. The second one is easy. The third one, implementing the research, is the easiest of the four, because it's already been sort of decided by, once you define what's the method of research. So if you say it's going to be a survey, and we're going to do a survey using phone or using people's email, all you need to do is to have people that are willing to call a lot of people and ask them questions. So it's a boring job, ungrateful job, but it doesn't require a lot of knowledge and a lot of skills to do it. You just call people and ask questions and call as many people as quickly as possible to get a large number of people responding. So it's a low executive, not even executive, it's very low qualified job to implement the research plan. Why do I say that? Because oftentimes when I ask the question is which one is the most difficult, there's 50% of the students that think that it's implementing it, collecting the data that is the hardest thing. No, you can even use robots to do the collection of the data, and therefore it's not the most difficult. Interpreting, reporting is as the last part. That's very difficult. So where do you get information? You get information from existing information that is already available, from databases, from published information that you can just seek with keywords like Lindsay just showed us, and from primary data that you will collect yourself. So the easiest one to collect are the secondary data. It's oftentimes the one that requires less effort, less knowledge, less time, less money. In some instances, it's almost free and you can collect it within seconds. The problem is it might be old, it might be coming from unreliable sources, and that makes it very difficult. The primary data collection is sort of the opposite. If you're collecting it yourself, it's called primary data. It's therefore less biased because you know more or less how much biases you bring in the research, versus you don't know what the people who collected the data, how many biases exactly they brought in the research. It's more recent because you just decided to collect it now, so you have something that is recent. It's more expensive, it's more time consuming because you're gonna have to have the resources to collect it and spend the time in order to collect it. And the larger the database, the more time probably it's gonna take. So there's pros and cons. And oftentimes it comes from how important it is that the data be recent and you collect it yourself. How much time do you have, or can you wait? And how many questions do you have? How much research do you need to collect? Because sometimes you have to pick and choose and decide what is good enough to be secondary and what needs to be primary. The reality is you need both. The reality is the more you want to be disruptive, the more you need primary data. The more you want to justify a past decision, the more you can use secondary data. But to justify future actions, oftentimes you have to do primary data because the future is rarely being collected in the past. What will be the future is oftentimes collected just right now and not collected in the past. So there are two types of data besides being primary and secondary. There's also qualitative and quantitative. Qualitative is data that you collect by not focusing on the number, the size of the number of provider of data. So if you're doing survey, you worry about collecting from lots of people. So therefore, a survey is a quantitative research. The importance is the statistical significance. It's the size of the population. It's the reliability of your data to be representative of your population. So that's quantitative. The qualitative research, the purpose is not to have statistical significance. In fact, your statistics, there will be no statistical significance. In fact, it's so poor that you don't even claim any statistical significance. You're just not statistically significant. However, you go in more depth and you can interview experts. So sometimes you get more information from interviewing 4 experts that you would from interviewing 400 customers. So 4 versus 400, that makes a big difference. Sometimes you actually don't get any new information from talking to experts because they are different from the consumers. The experts are becoming, outliers, extreme, and their perspective are not the perspective of the common consumers we are focusing on. So asking experts, I'm not saying it's great all the time. It depends. It depends what you're focusing on. It depends if you are asking people to think about themselves. If they think about themselves, the experts, they're going to think about what they like. And so if you're asking experts of music, what do they like? They're not most likely not going to like what's popular within the consumers. And yet you may be selling a product for a large quantity of consumers. So therefore a product is meant to be popular. And so asking experts, you may be asking the wrong people. However, when you ask experts, maybe you're working in the music industry, you're going to ask them for some trends or some new technology that they saw that could be used in the music, because the experts who know about the technological advancements and innovation and all this, which may not be known by the common customers. But the common customers are the ones that are going to buy. So you want to ask about the problem you're solving. And then with the experts, you find maybe some of the solution that could be the solution for these problems. So you could say, let's do several interviews of experts, finding, or first you're starting with the consumers, finding problems, and then asking the experts to look for some solutions. And then you go back to the consumers, seeing that the solutions that you got from the experts, how well would they work with the consumers? So that is what I recommend to my students, is become much more familiar with qualitative research by interviewing few people and being good at conducting interviews where you have back and forth question and answer that spring new questions, and you have the possibility with qualitative research to get the answer to the question which starts with why X, why Z, versus in quantitative research, the answer to why do people buy and this and that is poorly answered. In quantitative research, you find how often or much, right? So it's like pretzels. Do you buy pretzels? Yes or no? So the yes or no is better answered by quantitative research, because then you could say, let's see the income, the low income, the medium income, and the high income. How many people said yes? How many people said no? We give this to 5,000 people, and then we have a statistical significance that can show that the higher the income, the less they buy pretzels. So quantitative research allows you that, and it gives you a how much and a what, when, how, but the why is much better answered by the qualitative research. So when you're trying to understand people benefits, when you're trying to understand people motivation, you're much better off doing qualitative research. So that's why most of the disruptive findings come from the answer to why people do this, and therefore that's why you need to focus on the qualitative research. It's much better to get an answer to this. Let's ask ourselves a question. Why do people go to the gym? As an example. Why do you think people go to the gym? Why do you think people go to the gym? What's the most common answers, do you think?
To get in better shape.
To get in better shape. But why do they want to get in better shape?
To either look better or be healthier.
So to look better, to be healthier, okay? But what do you mean to be healthier and to look better? Why?
So you don't have a heart attack early because exercise is good at making that not happen.
So most people go to the gym not to get a heart attack. I mean, it's very possible that when you ask people why you go to the gym, they tell you, I don't want to get a heart attack. I want to lose weight. I want to be healthy. But there's a difference between what they say and what they think. And that's what's very difficult. In a quantitative research, you'll ask 10,000 people, why do they go to the gym? And you'll put the answer for health, avoid a heart attack, lose weight, look younger, be strong, increase their athletic performance for a specific sport. And people will answer all of this, and then you're going to get 20% for this, 10% for this, 50% for this, right? The older, the more they select this, the younger, the more they select this. But what's interesting is when you do an interview and you take 100 people and you do an interview with 100 people, you're going to get a big, significant answer of people that will tell you at the end, the why is for sex. The why is for Tinder. And then you go, what? That's why they go to the gym, for Tinder? And then you go, oh, yes, being healthy, staying young, having strong muscles and all this. That makes sense. It's for the appearance. It's for the confidence. It's for the ego. It's for the self-concept. It's for all of this. And it's for the social self-concept and for the image and for the expectations they may have and the requirement of the society because of some stereotype or whatever. That answer, which is more true to the answer of the reason why people go to the gym, you rarely get it inside a survey, but you will get it into an interview. Now, what's interesting is if this interview is one-on-one, you're more likely to get it than if it's an interview, which is called a focus group of several people being questioned and interviewed at the same time, because people are going to try to be socially correct, socially desirable, and therefore they're going to be sort of shy and not say what they think. What's interesting to me, the most interesting thing in research is to get people to tell you what they think. Number one, and more deep than that, is to get people to tell you what they don't even realize that what they want. So it's like, I want something that does not exist. People are almost never going to tell you what they want that does not exist. They're only going to tell you what they want that exists. But then it's even better when you can actually tell them to express themselves in a way of sort of, what would you dream? If this existed, would you want it? If this existed, would you not want it? What would you want that would be different? And people projecting themselves in what would they want if it existed. Show them prototypes, show them ideas. And even then, you have to be very careful because they may want an idea as a prototype, as a concept, but when it's the time actually to buy it, they may not buy it. They may not buy it because they may be not realizing that this is what they would want, but sometimes they wait for other people to buy it because they're waiting for a trend. And once the product becomes trendy, successful with some influencers or whatever, this is when they buy it. They may even buy it and not use it, even though they think it's great. So consumers are very complicated, and doing research is very difficult because when you don't do research so just to have some data and sort of justify yourself, is you do some research because you try to minimize your risks. You try to optimize your success. So you don't want to do that research because you have to. You do research because you want to, because it's a very effective way to improve the likelihood that you will have success. Research is your platform for success. Okay? Do you have any questions? So when we talk about quantitative research, we very much talk about the concept of the likelihood, the probability that what is being collected in this research be true for the population that this research is supposed to be true. So that's the concept of probability. So you have different type of probability sampling. You have the one that maximize equal chances, and you have the one that really essentially try to use the sample that are the most easy to access. So in my field, my largest field of research is luxury perceptions. So the best people you should ask about luxury perceptions are people that will buy luxury. But there are different type of luxury. There are luxury that are affordable for most Americans, and there's luxury that are not easily affordable, and there's some luxury that most people don't even know because it's so confidential. So there's different level of luxury. And therefore, depending on the luxury you sell, you should ask the people that are extremely wealthy or well off. And so, however, the most, in my field of research, the most used population for doing research are students. I mean, students, it's called a convenient sample because professors have access to the students. They give them questionnaires, and eventually these are affordable and convenient, accessible, and so forth. But they have a low reliability because they may not represent well the population that you're trying to get the information from. Depends, because there's luxury products that you may be focusing on, or specific brand that you may be focusing on, that are still meaningful for the students. So I remember when I was doing research in Australia, I was using Levi's jeans, for example, to be doing some of the research on luxury. And I was using students, and that made sense because Levi's back in the 90s was considered a luxury brand, and considered luxury brand purchased by a lot of students. And that was one of the brands that students would want to spend more money to buy. It was considered a very expensive brand, versus if you come to the United States of America, Levi's is not considered a luxury brand. So different brands, different markets. You have to know. That's why you have to have some access to some databases in order to see if the population you will use, the brand that you will use, is a priori either that situation luxury enough or not luxury enough to be considered by who, and what are the statistics that exist, existing statistics that exist to explain all of this. So probability sampling is only an issue of quantitative research. Now, when you look at the 3 layers of research, so this is a slide that is very important. This is a slide that explains everything about research that you should know. The basic research, the most superficial research you can do, it's called exploratory research. The most elementary action in exploratory research is to collect existing data called secondary data. So if you use a journal, if you use Google to do a research, you're doing exploratory research, and you're trying to gather some preliminary information. This information may be quantitative because you may be collecting existing results of some surveys. Maybe there are recent surveys from different states or different countries, and you adding all of these data to create some kind of new data, and you're doing exploratory research. Now, you can also, so that's quantitative. Secondary exploratory research, you could look at secondary existing qualitative research, so maybe the result of some interviews, or you could decide to do some primary research. But in that situation of exploratory research, it can only be qualitative primary. Because in exploratory research, you mostly look at secondary qualitative, quantitative, or primary, only qualitative, because you're not going in depth. You're only trying to define some problems. You're only trying to collect information to see, to make some hypotheses, assumptions, propositions of things may occur or not occur. So the level of certainty is low because the level of reliability is low because this is not meant to be statistically significant. However, you answer a lot of why and make a lot of if and maybe that may be sufficient to make some decisions. The beauty of using this is it's fast and you be making decision quickly, but you will have a higher risk that if you go and move in the descriptive research, which in this situation is only quantitative and it's going to try to be statistically significant and using stats and large number of people in order to have some quantitative analysis and so forth, using software and interpretation from formulas and all this. So now I have a question for you, just to see if this all made sense. Can you start doing research by doing descriptive research without doing exploratory research? Is it possible to do descriptive research without using exploratory research? Is it possible? The opposite of this is, should you always start research with exploratory before you can do descriptive research? Which one is first? Is there first or
Maybe
second?
descriptive research.
So maybe you can start with descriptive research. And so the answer is no. You should always have qualitative research done, preliminary exploratory research done before you do descriptive research. So we go back to the example of why do people go to the gym? For example, you have I mean, we did a few fitness centers as clients. I must have done 3 or 4 in the past 20 years. And so we wonder why people go to the gym. Should we interview people on asking this question? And then once we interview people, give a questionnaire of 12 questions to 150 people? Or should we just put in Mintel or some other databases, you know, the fitness industry, why do people go to the gym before we start collecting the information? You should probably look to see if there's an answer to your question before you start collecting, because you may be reinventing the wheel. And so if you are the owner of the business, you have so many things you need to do that you don't want to spend time reinventing the wheel. You need to go to what's essential. If you are an employee of the business, and you need to make sure that the owner is okay that you spend time collecting information that already exists. But most of the time, nobody wants to collect information that already exists. So descriptive research should only be done after you have done exploratory research. And that's why, if you ask me, what's the first stage? Therefore, should we go in Lindsay databases and put our nose in this and see what's been published and all that to get some ideas before we go interview people? And once we have interviewed people and we've looked at the databases, should we go then now do a survey? And the answer is, in the best world, that's how you do it. You don't start by doing a survey. Having been taught for almost 30 years, I can tell you that it's extremely common that students, I mean, it's not 100%, but pretty close to 100%, that the students, when I talk about research, they think about a survey. And when I tell them you need to do some research, that they don't go in the databases, they don't interview anyone. They start putting 10, 15, 20 questions on a piece of paper, and then print these and give it to 50 people, and then collect this information of yes or no, and then they think that they're going to get much out of this. When in fact, descriptive research, if you start with descriptive research, you probably collect really something is worthless, because you have to go through collecting the answer to your questions first that exist. If you're satisfied, you leave it there, you move on. Maybe like Lindsay said, you know, once I found this report on the streaming, the music streaming, I was very excited, because sometimes that's going to make your research 50% easier. There's already a recent research on music streaming. Therefore, there's going to be a lot of questions that are going to be answered. And therefore, you're not going to have to do as much exploratory, as much interviews, as much quantitative research. It's going to be there available. And so, and that's why she says, this, finding this report almost makes it, what did she say? Almost makes it so good that I've sort of forgiven not having found any good recent reports for the flower industry to clients, you know, and that was sort of a joke. And that's a joke. Once you find extremely good existing data, normally you will want to see what you can do from this and not have to do anything anymore. However, it is very common that you have to do something. And so I explained this, she was still in the class. And so the most common way is you go through databases. Once you've collected information databases, you speak to some consumers. That becomes your interviews or your focus groups. And then from this, you make decisions and you try not to go further than that. If you need to go further than that, then you look at creating your own survey. And then that will be the third stage. You know, first stage is existing data, second stage is interviewing, and then third stage is making your own survey. But if you make your own surveys by knowing that there was really nothing that could give you enough confidence in the first stage and the second stage, that you have to, using the information that you learned from the first stage and second stage, are creating a third stage of a survey. And that survey is necessary for the future of your business, for the survival, you know, of this business to grow into something much bigger. And you have to justify. I mean, if you work for a large company like Nestle, and you work for their research department, that's all you're doing is research. So it doesn't matter, because all day long you're doing surveys, interviews, data. There's no really first, second, and third. Is that you're just going to do a survey at the end. You're going to do lots of surveys, but still the process is going to be, is the question we have answered by something existing, exploratory research. Can we talk to some consumers and see what they think? Still exploratory research, qualitative research. And then with this, we're going to move into non-qualitative, purely quantitative, which is the descriptive research. Do you have any question with this? It's not the simplest thing. And the more you've done research, which is not very common among the students, I find, but the more you've done research and you've done work on this kind of things, the more what I said suddenly may open your eyes and explain a lot of things that you may not have understood. But it's not understood by a lot of people, because it's a process of max optimization, trying to do the least and get the most. And that's why exploratory research is oftentimes sufficient to optimize without having to go to a deeper layer, which is the descriptive research. So since it's deeper, it has to be the next stage. And then I haven't even talked about causal research. Why? Because that's like a deeper descriptive research. It's even more scientific, if you want. So causal research is done only by 2 people. I mean, 99% of who does it is either a huge company. We're talking, you know, Costco, General Motors, huge companies, or by academics. So academics, they do descriptive research. Most of what is done is descriptive research, but causal research is even more involving, because you have to do this in a laboratory where you're going to experiment the cause and effect. So you're going to try to manipulate people with different treatments. So imagine a price, and you're selling something $100, and you're going to try to see how much more can you sell it before you start losing too many customers. So you're going to sell it 101 to this group, see this group of 120 people, see their reaction, and 102 to a group that is supposed to be the same, and see their reaction. And so you're going to do this experiment until suddenly you start losing customers. But because now you're trying at 106, you know that you made $6 extra profit. You're losing customers. The number of customers you're losing may not mean that the minute you start losing someone, you should stop. You're looking at the cause and effect. You have 99% of the people that still want to buy the product at 106, but now you have 1% that disappear. Is it still worth making the extra dollar, or should you go back to 105 where you didn't have anyone that stopped buying the product? So the causal experiments, it's, as it says, it's an experiment, it's a cause and effect. It's looking at treatment with some group of people that would be sort of a neutral group where they didn't get any effect, and you see if there's a random error from the exercise, or if there's a real difference for people when they see what you're doing. So as a recap, do you have any question on this before I do my recap? So if hopefully you understood everything, I think between what you may have done in the past, the PowerPoint is available in the study guides, and this video that I'm going to post, you should be able to look at it again, and hopefully it should be making some sense. But now, just as a transition to the next slide, is I'm hoping that nobody is going to do a survey in the class, or at least if they do a survey, I would be very curious to see if they did exploratory research. But like I said, the most common thing is students do descriptive research without even doing any exploratory. And so if you really go and insist that you want to do descriptive research, which is, 10% of the time, and it's done well, then why not? But it's unnecessary. It is very, very, very likely that between collecting information that already exists through the various databases that Lindsay showed you today, and interviewing some customers, some experts, some businesses, some whatever individuals from different groups, and doing great interviews, you should be able to get enough information from this that you don't need to go into descriptive research. That should be a happy moment, because you should learn from this that therefore there won't be as much work because it's not necessary. I don't require descriptive research, because if I required descriptive research, that would mean that I require exploratory research. In fact, I only suggest that exploratory research is good for most of the time. Therefore, you don't have to go further. So that should be easier. The other reason is because we don't have the time to do all of this. And so in business, and we talked about time, the thing that we have the least is time still made sense in there. Because of time constraints, oftentimes you want to do what's most optimizing. So just to recap, is you've got some data. This data is broken down into secondary data, the one that exists, the one that you will be using at the very beginning to do your exploratory research. And then you have primary data, the one that you have to collect because you want better data that you have collected yourself. In this primary data, you have qualitative, which is not based on number. It's not statistically significant. It's mostly worrying about the why. Why do people do things? And then you have the quantitative that focus on the frequency, how often, who, when, what, and it's based on large quantity of people. So secondary and primary qualitative are part of the exploratory research, versus the quantitative data is part of the descriptive research and also experimental. So the most common, so simple question, what are the two most common qualitative research methods that you know? Anyone remember maybe, or what are the two most common qualitative data research methods? Interview.
I was gonna say focus groups, interview.
Focus groups. Yeah, focus groups, interview. So these are the two most common methods. Thank you, Melissa. And now quantitative research. What are the two most common methods? So there's one that everybody knows, it's survey, right? And the second one, it's more of like digital, mechanical, video-based, where you film people and you look at the behavior. Or you could say, using the internet, like the cookies which are measuring where you went, where you clicked, from which page you came, from which page you go, how long did you stay, and all these different things. That's a quantitative data method. And Google Analytics are mostly quantitative data methods, and it's sort of records and observation and click and all of these things. So it's machine learning and collecting data from machine learning. But the other one is survey. So these are the two main methods for quantitative data versus interviews and focus groups are the two most common for qualitative data. Why am I repeating this? Is because I strongly recommend that you do some interviews. I mean, it's a strongly recommend, like require. And I also require that you do some focus group. It's not like you can't get an A if you didn't do any focus groups. It's not like I'm the type of professor, if you don't do what I say, therefore you don't get the best grade. It's more for the sake of, if you do these, you are more likely to find something that's going to be better. So finding something that is great without doing these, it's sort of possible, but it's so unlikely that I would rather tell you that I recommend you to do them, because it just increases your chances to find this opportunity by speaking to the customer. And so I want you to understand this. It's you start with looking at the database, and sometimes you find nothing. Then you interview the people. Then you go back to the database, then you interview the people back and forth, back and forth. And that's the exercise. So that's why I started this with the quote, is who does nothing gets nothing. From Luc, is identifying opportunities, making some money, making lots of money, is usually not from people who do nothing. So I know there's some people there, sometimes very jealous, and oh, this person has a lot, and this person has nothing, and it's unfair. And there's some situation where it's unfair, but most of the time, the more people have is the more they work in order to have it, and they put in themselves of asking, of doing. Doers get more than dreamers. And so in that situation, I'd say the more you go in these databases and you share what you found with your team member, and you have discussion and brain storm sessions and so forth, and then the more you start talking to do interviews and focus groups. When should you do focus groups? Well, you do focus groups when you see that you need to have people interact with each other. You may see that it's not a good idea to do focus groups with experts, and maybe you don't want to start with focus groups because you want to have had a few interviews before you can manage 3 or 4 people, 5 people at the same time. So just to sort of train yourself, you do it one-on-one, and then 1-on-2, 1-on-3, 1-on-4, 1-on-5. And then you see that you're doing well with the 1-on-5. You don't need to do the 1-on-1. And the interview may be just a process in order to get you more experienced. And so that's okay, but don't think that because I'm a professor, I'm telling you that you have to do research because I want to see something that says research. Is because I know that it's most likely to be true research that you will find something that's going to make your life easier. Okay? Do you have any question about research? All right, so now I'm going to move into consumers and how do they make decisions. So there's one thing called the the input, process, and output, which is a complicated slide, and I'm just going to keep it very simple. The input is the fact that you talk about it's the information. Consumer receive information. Consumer receive a lot of information that don't memorize even 10% of what they receive. And that's why as a business, you have to keep creating new input and repeating input. An ad, another ad, another ad, an influencer and social media and this and that. And you keep repeating until the people, they become familiar or they have an opinion, an attitude, which was sort of forged upon them maybe, or that they've created by even trying the product and wanting more, buying the product, maybe saving in order to buy the product or whatever. So this input is very important, and they that's the first step. But as a business, you have some control over the inputs, but you don't have control over the process, which is called also like the black box. The process is how do people think? And not only you don't know how they think, but most of the time the consumer don't even know what they think. They may even believe something or believe something that they think they believe, but in fact, they have a different perspective. So there is some element of our brain which is sort of irrational and maybe controlled, not by, which is controlled, just to simplify, by emotions. And they are jumping sometimes to conclusion. And sometimes it's also an element which is sort of say lazy, and it jumps to conclusion because we want to be able to save energy for doing other things. So we just buy something because it says #1 most sold product in America. And so we see #1, it doesn't have to be true. It's just, okay, that's enough for me to decide that this is okay. So the process is complicated, and it's very different at different times for different things, for different people and so forth. And so the process is interesting, and we try to understand it. And the idea is we can't understand it for everyone. So we try to focus on the target that we want to sell the product and try to know how the target think and the reason, the benefits that they're looking for in order to offer those benefits better than anyone else. This promise of satisfaction better than anyone else for the person to want to buy this person. So we're starting to see it, but in 2024, we're going to hear all kinds of politicians promising things. Do they promise things that they really care, or do they promise things that they know the people really care, and they are promising these, and it's irrelevant of the fact that they're going to follow through. It's more saying the promise that they know are going to get them elected. So that's what it is promise them what's going to get you elected is what makes you a successful elected politician. And so selling products is the same. Now there is an issue, which is an issue of satisfaction, which is that if people are not receiving what they expected, is then they are dissatisfied, and then they may not buy again, and they may even talk down on the product and so forth. So that's very, very important. What are the factors that explains people behavior? So the deepest factor, the factor that has the biggest impact on how we make decisions is not so much our personality or our age or which group we belong to, and how much we know about the product. The one that has the most impact is our culture, because our culture has values, and people buy on a set of values that belong to their culture. So the way we dress, the food we eat, the lifestyle we have is very much based on the culture. But what's interesting is also the subculture. So your subculture has an impact on your subculture, maybe based on the nationality and ethnicity. It may be based on your gender. It may be based on a religion. It may be based on some hobby activities, political affiliation that you have as well. That has a deep impact on how you consume. So following with this is who which group do you belong to? Group from a social class, groups such as a role, mothers and brothers, and I don't know which sorority or which group you belong to, but also here the biggest impact as well is which groups do you aspire. So there's a group you belong, the group you would like to belong, and even the group that you don't belong, but you would like to belong, has an impact on what you will be consuming. Obviously, the family has a huge impact, and the impact of the family varies with ages. One may say that the teenagers have the least impact from their family versus the young children have a much greater impact. But as people get older, the impact of the family becomes again very important. So your age has an influence as a generation. If you are married, if you have kids, depending if you have a job, no job, the type of job you have has an impact. The fact that you may have savings, no savings, and also, but to a very far extent, is your personality has an impact. So your personality is maybe you like things that are new, or you may be the opposite. You don't like things that are new because you don't trust them. Maybe you like things to be made in America versus maybe you don't care so much if it's made in America. Maybe your personality is you like to buy something different all the time and change, or maybe you like to buy the same thing. So personality has an impact, but it's not as much as your family or the social class or the specific culture that you belong to. And then there are the elements that explains what you're going to buy from what you know. And so you're more likely to buy what you know, what you think is important. To me, what's important when I buy toothpaste is the decay prevention. So the brands that are going to talk about decay probably will get more of your attention versus the brands that talks about good breath, nice, fresh breath. But if you care more about fresh breath than decay, suddenly fresh breath is going to be more important. So your attitudes, what you believe, your perceptions, what your experiences are, will have an impact on how you buy. This directly connects to the concept of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which is that people go through different stages, different reasoning for why they buy. So I buy something because I want to fulfill my basic needs. Your basic needs are psychological and safety. So you want to breathe and eat and drink and sleep and have somewhere safe. These are the basic needs. You may be buying a product because of its safety. You may be buying a product because it's reliable. And so all of these will be the safety, security needs. You may be buying a product because it has a good taste. So in that situation, or it's nutritious, or it's filling, and that situation will be physiological. You may be buying a product because there is social needs. So you go to McDonald's because when you're a kid, your parents used to take you to McDonald's, and you think McDonald's is great and it's a happiest place on earth, and therefore the simple social needs of affiliation or nostalgia or something like this, or belonging to a group, will be the reason why you consume this product. The ego needs will be the fact that not only you want to be part of a group, but you would want to be recognized as being better. So in that situation, you're not just going to buy the standard product, but you're going to try to look for some kind of limited edition, smaller production, or maybe more expensive version of the product in order to separate yourself, because maybe you're trying to get some power or recognition or something like this. Now, the last layer of the needs is called self-actualization or achievement or self-fulfillment. This one is interesting as well because it's very personal. So it's not an extension of the ego. The social needs and the ego needs are very much based on others. What will others think? So therefore, I'm going to make a decision, not so much based on what I think, but based on what others will think of my decision and how they will feel about my decision, what I consume. The last one, the self-actualization, has nothing to do with the standards of your culture and society. It's a very inner directed need fulfillment, where you're going to say, I want this painting, and this painting is not from anyone known. It's not an expensive painting, and it's not a painting that has any value. So having value would be the safety, being a known name that people recognize, maybe the social needs, being someone recognizable and expensive would be the ego need. The self-actualization is you just like this painting because it's pleasing to your eyes. It's very aesthetic. It's emotional. Nobody has to see it. It may be somewhere and nobody sees, but you bought it because you just like what it says. So the fulfilling the needs is very important, and knowing which level you're fulfilling is very, very important, because there's a hierarchy. Usually consumers think about the basic standard things to be at the lowest level, and the more extreme, emotional, deep products at the top. When you sell a product, you want it to be better, you want it to be innovative, and you have to be careful, because you don't want to be your product to be perceived not sufficiently innovative. Mostly if you've been very successful with the previous product. So you want enough innovation for people to want to maybe buy your brand when they didn't buy your brand before, or buy your new product when they have the previous generation of products. So it has to be enough. And this is called a just noticeable difference. It's the minimum change necessary for people to perceive that it's more for the same. And so in that situation, the consumers want a J&D in order to make consumptions. It is rare that they buy a product if they don't see that there's something additional, something better. In a way, it's sort of this concept of the cherry on the cake. Every cake looks the same, then you make a decision to add a cherry. If you add the cherry, they don't notice the cherry, they won't buy the product because they don't notice that it's enough a change for them to buy this new cake. But if the cherry is just enough for them to see that it's better, then you let them buy the cherry. This is an exercise I did with my students, where we worked on this project for a company called Weetabix, which is a very famous British breakfast cereal, but it's also in New Zealand, South Africa, Australia. And in these countries, it's the top 5 most sold breakfast cereal. However, when they are sold in America, they do very poorly. And so we decided we could come up with a better solution. So instead of talking about the opportunity, I talk about the idea here, which is wrong. But to explain the idea is, I would say that we want to sell this to children, but to sell it to the children, it needs to be tasty, it needs to be friendly and funny, convenient, and at the same time have some nutritional value for the parents to feel that this is a benefit. So the combination of this, to explain it, is it's sort of Ensure. Ensure is this product that is reliable, that's recommended by doctors, it's available at the hospital, it has nutritional value, but at the same time, it's not very fun for the children, so they won't eat that. And the one thing for sure is they're not eating the Weetabix because it looks, in their eyes, as defined as boring. But then we find that they like this product called Go-Gurt. Why do they like it? Because it's fun, friendly, easy to use, tasty. And so we start thinking about, could there be a combination of these 3 products that will be supported by the opportunity that these 3 products generate? But another thing that is very important to know is, when you sell a cereal to children, is you need a cartoon character, some kind of icon, some kind of a character that will be getting the attention and retain the attention and symbolize what the product is about. So the students created Go Wito, which is this little sort of character that is on a paste that the children could eat while they walk, without having to have anything like a plate or a bowl or anything. They could eat it straight from there. It's fun, easy, and it has the nutritional value that the parents are looking for, because it's inside there is protein, and at the same time there is the whole grain, and the fibers, and all of this nutritional value. Plus, it's fun. So that's what will support. We can anticipate the success of this product. So how do the buyers make decisions? Is first they recognize that they have a need. The need comes from a gap. Maybe you have a puncture tire, and now you need to buy a tire. And therefore, you're looking for a solution. You don't know anything about tires, and you find that there are different warranties, different brands, different prices, different characteristic of the tire in terms of the type of speed that you could be driving with this tire, and performances, and reputation, and all of this. So at that time, you're searching for information, and then you make an evaluation, which may be a balance between what you want to spend and the benefits you want to get. And then you buy the product, and eventually you may start liking this brand, and then you keep being loyal to this brand because you've been satisfied. It has met your satisfaction. So the buyer decision process is very important, and you need to realize that sometimes you have a product that is very successful, and you need to sort of unsatisfy the customers with your product by creating a new reference point for them to see a problem with your product, but to see that the solution to the problem of the current product is being solved by the new product. In that situation, you don't lose them, and you keep sustaining them with your strategy of providing product that satisfy their needs. You need to do this because before preempting your competitors coming up with a better product, or you do it because your competitors came up with a better product, and now you have to react with an even better product than your competitors. Like I said, next week we'll meet again in class. We will have the presentation from group 1 and 2. And after this, we will follow with meetings where I would be meeting with 3 and 4. And like I said, it would be great if 1 and 2 by 8:45 could send me an email with their updated opportunities, so that way I can give them some feedback. Since I will be giving the feedback directly to the students that I will be meeting as a group. Do you have any questions? All right. Well, I see it's just about 8:45. Thank you for coming today. And
thank you, Professor.
You're welcome. Thank you for coming today, and I hope you do well with your groups, and you do knock at the door and present yourself and ask. That way you more likely to get something. Hopefully you got this message today.
Thank you, Professor.
Have a great. You're welcome.
Thank you, Professor.
Thank you.
Have a good week, and I'll see you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Professor.
I'll see you next week. Have a great week. Bye-bye.